The letter came in an envelope without a return address, the kind of envelope people use when they don't want to be found. The handwriting was tremulous, a pastor's script I knew from signatures on wedding programs and casseroles left at funerals. It was from Pastor Caleb Ross, my late husband's minister and friend, a man who had buried Michael with a voice that never once cracked. Inside was a single page and a brass key taped to the bottom margin. The page said, "Helen, if you value your life, do not trust Tessa. Ask no one for help. Use the key. Look in Michael's Bible, Isaiah 41:10. Forgive me. CR." I read it 3 times at my kitchen island, morning light spreading across the butcher block, the coffee going cold. I was 68, a retired high school principal, and until that moment, I would have told you my life was quiet, respectable, and stable, even in grief. My son Andrew lived 20 minutes away in Round Rock with his wife Tessa and my granddaughter Harper. They came for Sunday pot roast. I joined their church, Riverbend, after Michael died 2 years ago because I couldn't stand the silence of the house. The pastor, this same Caleb, had prayed in our living room when the hospice people removed the bed. I remembered his hand on my shoulder, heavy and warm. I looked up Isaiah 41:10 in Michael's Bible because I am the kind of woman who follows instructions, especially when someone says, "Forgive me." The verse is about fear and strength. And I found something else tucked behind it, a tiny plastic bag with another key and a folded note that smelled faintly of men's cologne and old paper. Michael's scrawl said in blue ink faded at the edges, "If anything happens to me, use this at Hill Country Storage, Unit 107. Don't tell Andrew until you know everything." I stood very still in the kitchen, my left hand on the open Bible, my right hand shaking. My husband had never kept secrets from me. We had been married 43 years. We weathered the lean years and the 1 year we almost didn't make it. The year Andrew was 17, and so angry at me for saying no to a road trip with older boys that he didn't speak to me for 2 weeks straight. Michael had been the peacemaker. He had been the one to say, "We are a family, Helen. We tell each other the truth." After Michael died, officially a fall down our back steps that caused a brain bleed, Andrew packed the garage and Tessa took over my pills and appointments like a benevolent CEO. "We're going to take care of you, Mom," she said, rearranging my spice rack into military order. "You did enough for us." I was grateful. It is a frightening thing to lose the person who knows your calendar and your worst dreams. But the letter said, "Do not trust Tessa." And my hands remembered every time she had taken my debit card to pick up groceries or pressed a lavender pill into my palm before bed. The letter changed the color of those memories. I drove to Hill Country Storage with the brass key in my pocketbook and Michael's second key in a jewelry pouch. The storage facility sits behind an H-E-B and a taqueria that has been there since Austin was smaller and slower. I signed in, walked past units with corrugated metal doors like sleeping mouths, and found 107. The key turned with an oily click. Inside, there was no furniture, no boxes, no forgotten fishing poles, just a Rubbermaid tub, a banker's box, and a gray safe with a square digital pad. Michael's key opened the safe. Inside were things people do not leave in safes unless they are afraid. A disposable phone in its plastic, a flash drive, a thin stack of notarized documents, and a spiral notebook with Michael's first initial on the front. On the very top, a letter folded in thirds, signed in Pastor Caleb's careful hand. "Helen, if you are reading this, it is because I failed to stop what began a year ago. Your daughter-in-law came to me for help starting a charity. Blue Halo, she said, would help seniors access meals and equipment. I vouched for her. It was my sin. What she built is not a charity. It is a front. I believe she and others used your name. I believe you are in danger." Michael came to me with questions. He died a week later. I have lived with the cowardice of my silence. In this box is what Michael gathered. I am going to the sheriff when I can, but there are men who will not let me speak. If I cannot, please take this to someone who will. I am sorry. God help me. Caleb. I sat on the concrete floor and wept into my hands. Not because I understood everything, but because I understood enough to know that the story of my husband's fall might not be a story about carelessness. Michael's spiral notebook contained dates, names, and sketches of flow charts that I made no sense of at first. Blue Halo, Careway, Home Health, a list of banks, and something circled in red, DCF, Durable Financial Power of Attorney Attempt. Under the notebook, there were photocopies of forms with my name, medical intake summaries I had never seen, a signed cognitive assessment I did not remember taking, with a score penciled in that suggested mild impairment. I am a woman who has graded thousands of papers. I know what looks like my signature and what does not. This did not. I drove home with the gray safe in the back of my car and a heat behind my eyes that was not entirely sadness. People think retirement is the end of responsibility. It is not. It is the beginning of a new kind of vigilance, the kind where you must guard your own body and your own name. I set the safe on my dining room table and plugged in the disposable phone at my kitchen outlet. Pastors do not write letters like that to stable women with safe lives. At noon, my doorbell rang. Tessa. She didn't call first. She never called when she wanted control. She wore her gym leggings and a Riverbend church sweatshirt, a ponytail so tight it looked crocheted into her skull. She brought a bag from Whole Foods smelling of cilantro and something sweet. "Just checking in," she said, sweeping into my kitchen. "Andrew's with Harper at her SAT prep. I thought we'd do salads and talk about, what's all this?" She was looking at the safe. She stood perfectly still for 1 second, the way an actor holds a beat before a line. Then she smiled, tilted her head, and touched the safe with 2 fingers like it might be hot. "Are we decluttering? That's so great." "I had a letter," I said, "from Pastor Caleb." Her smile did not move. She had worked hard on that smile over the years. "That's nice. He's been on my heart. He's going through a lot." "What's he going through?" I asked. "He didn't tell you about the break-in at his office." She opened the fridge, put in the salad bag, and took out the small glass bottle that holds my bedtime pills. She turned it around, reading the label too long. "People are crazy." "Don't touch that," I said. She put it down. "Of course." She turned to me, hands up, palms outward, the physical grammar of innocence. "Helen, are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Is this about the forms the clinic sent? We can fill those out together. You know the insurance company wants to make sure you're protected. It's just standard." "I am not signing anything today," I said. "Who asked you to sign anything?" She laughed. "Come on, let's eat before the lettuce gets soggy." I watched her set 2 plates. She used to ask before touching a thing in my kitchen. That stopped around the time I could not find my checkbook, and she told me I must have misplaced it. Later that week, the bank called about activity I didn't remember. We fixed it. We always fixed it. It occurs to me there are types of harm that are indistinguishable from help until you see them next to a letter taped to a key. After lunch, she asked if I wanted to go with her to the Good Clinic on Bee Cave that does a comprehensive senior wellness panel. I said I was tired. She said she would schedule it for me. I told her I would prefer to schedule my own. She said, "We're all on the same team, okay?" and kissed my cheek lightly, first wiping my cheek with a napkin like I had crumbs I did not have. When she left, I plugged the flash drive into my old laptop at the dining table and said a small, dark prayer that what I was about to see would be an overreaction. The drive contained scanned documents and a folder of audio files labeled by dates. The documents were applications for grants and invoices for mobility aids, pre-hospice counseling, and cognitive screening services. Many had my name. Some had the names of people I knew from church. The invoices were paid by something called Blue Halo Aid, Inc. The audio files were phone calls recorded with an app, Michael's voice speaking with an insurance representative, a woman in a hospital billing department, and then on the last 3 files with Pastor Caleb. Michael's voice was steady but tight. "I don't understand why my wife's cognitive screening is in your system. She hasn't had a screening." "It was conducted in home," the woman on the phone said. "We have a signed attestation from a caregiver." "What caregiver?" "It shows your daughter-in-law as the point of contact." In the next file, Michael sounded tired. Caleb, I might be paranoid, but Tessa's asked about power of attorney 3 times this week, and there's this charity. I know, Michael, the pastor said. She told me about Blue Halo. I thought it was legitimate. Maybe it is. I just don't know. You want me to talk to her? No, I want proof. If it's clean, fine. But if it's not, I'm not letting my wife walk into a trap. The last file ended abruptly after the sound of someone knocking on a door, and Pastor Caleb saying, I have to go. The date was 3 days before Michael died. I did not sleep that night. At 2:47 in the morning, I opened every cabinet and drawer in my house I had not opened since the funeral. The house was so quiet you could hear the clock tick in the den. I found a packet tucked under placemats. Durable financial power of attorney, a medical release, a living will, my name already filled in. Tessa's handwriting neat in the margins with arrows. Helen signs here. Witness signs here. Notary at Blue Halo Gala. I put the packet back exactly as I had found it. There are times in a woman's life when she must pretend to be weaker than she is in order to be stronger than she's ever been. I dressed at dawn, put on my sneakers, and walked my cul-de-sac like any other morning. I waved to Mr. Aldrich, watering his stubborn lawn. I picked up my newspaper and tucked it under my arm. And then I called a former student turned attorney, Aisha Coleman, who had once given me a rose at graduation and said, "You're the reason I didn't drop out." She answered on the second ring. "Miss Whitmore," she said. She still calls me that. "You okay?" "I need to talk to someone who will not think grief is making me crazy," I said. "Where are you?" "In my kitchen." "Can you meet me at my office at 10? And Miss Whitmore, don't sign anything." At 9:30, before I left, I played foolish and called Tessa to ask for a ride to the pharmacy. She was there in 14 minutes. She lives for 14-minute rescues. In the car, she talked about Harper's practice test, how the school doesn't teach real life, how we should consider selling my house before the maintenance becomes a burden. I asked offhand what Blue Halo does for the neighborhood ladies group that keeps calling to donate. She brightened. "It's my baby," she said softly. "We make sure seniors aren't invisible. We cut through red tape. We get them what they need." She patted my hand like a grandmother. "Like you." I wanted to say 100 things. I said none. Sometimes the only way to catch a liar is to let them run out of new things to say. Aisha's office downtown smelled faintly of citrus and printer toner. She listened without interrupting while I told her everything. She watched the same files I had watched and read the same pages. Then she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers, a habit she'd teased me for back when I used to do it during discipline meetings. "Okay," she said. "This is serious. You understand that?" "I do. I want you out of your house for a few days, quietly. Not because I think you're in immediate danger, though maybe you are, but because we need to control the environment. If she's been inside your medicine, inside your mail, inside your desk, every square inch of that house is a crime scene waiting to be cleaned. Do you have somewhere to go where no one will think to look?" "I can check into the old Driscoll for a couple days," I said, feeling ridiculous saying it, like a woman who runs away to a hotel in a movie. "Perfect," she said. "I'll put you under a pseudonym. Pay cash. I'm also bringing in someone to look at that flash drive. And Miss Whitmore, I want you to meet a reporter. I don't want my dirty laundry on TV. This is not about TV. This is about pressure. People who operate in the dark don't like light." Aisha introduced me to a young woman named Maya Rivera, not yet 30, haircut in a sharp bob, eyes that missed nothing. "My grandmother was scammed by a fake Medicare plan 2 years ago," Maya said, blunt and fast and unapologetic. "I don't do victim pieces. I do accountability. If we publish anything, it'll be after we verify every single thing. But I want you to know I'm on your side." "I don't need a side," I said, more curtly than I meant to. And then I heard myself and softened. "I need the truth." Maya nodded. "Same thing to me." We made a plan. I would act normal. I would let Tessa schedule whatever she needed to schedule, and I would record every conversation with a small device Aisha slid across the desk, a thing the size of my thumb I was almost afraid to touch. I would send copies of any forms to Aisha before signing a thing, and I would meet Maya again under a different roof with a cup of hotel coffee and the safe tucked into the closet behind a stack of luggage. That afternoon, Tessa texted me 3 options for comprehensive senior wellness screenings. I picked the one with the softest name and the nicest website. When a clinic sounds like a spa, it is easier to walk into their trap. On Thursday morning, she picked me up and drove 10 miles over the speed limit, like she always does when she's nervous. The clinic looked like a boutique. White walls, succulents, a front desk clerk in a silk blouse. I recognized the kind of place as Blue Halo funded from the invoices. Lots of healing language, more marble than medicine. The intake form asked about falls and forgetfulness. I checked no and no. The clerk handed me another form. "We just need a consent to talk to your family about your care," she said. I read every line. "This allows you to release everything to my daughter-in-law," I said. "No." "Mom," Tessa said softly, leaning close like the world is loud and I am hard of hearing. "They can't help you if they can't talk to me. I am 70, not 7, I said. She smiled. "Of course. Do whatever makes you comfortable." We took our seats. She scrolled her phone. I studied the art on the wall, abstract blue circles that looked like halos. The nurse called my name. Inside the exam room, I answered every question like it was a test. I have been a principal. I know when someone is trying to trip you. When it was over, the doctor, a man with a too smooth forehead, said my heart was strong, my memory good, my numbers remarkably youthful. He signed a form and handed me a copy. In the waiting room, Tessa's smile was a fraction too wide. "Great news," I said in the car. "No dementia today." She exhaled, laughed lightly, and patted my knee like we were in on a joke. "You're lucky," she said. On Friday morning, Maya met me at the hotel. She brought a portable scanner and the kind of coffee only real reporters drink, dark enough to stand a spoon in it. "I pulled filings for Blue Halo," she said, setting up on the desk. "They look clean on the surface. Good photography, nice mission statement, donors list that checks out. But if you look at who paid for what, Blue Halo is funneling money to a private company, Careway, that bills insurance for cognitive screenings and then invoices the charity 4-Gap coverage for low-income seniors. Except most of those seniors are not low income, and some don't exist. How do you know? Because one of them is a woman I went to church with when I was little. She died in 2017. Maya had also found out something else. "Pastor Caleb was in a car crash last night," she said. "He's alive, but he's in ICU. The sheriff's office says it looks like a drunk driver. Witness says no skid marks." I sat down on the hotel bed. It is a strange thing when grief gets second wind. You think you survived it the first time, and then it rises like a wave behind you when you are already tired. "I need to see him," I said. Aisha called as I was tying my shoes. "Do not let Tessa see you at the hospital," she said. "If she knows Caleb reached out, we lose the element of surprise. Go with Maya, in and out." We stood in the ICU doorway and I took Pastor Caleb's hand. It was warm. He opened his eyes and smiled like he had planned to, like smiling was part of a prayer we both knew. He tried to speak. He couldn't. He squeezed my fingers 3 times like Michael did when he wanted me to know something as true as anything can be. I said, "I forgive you," because the letter had asked for it and because I meant it. You can forgive a man for being afraid. You can forgive yourself for being blind. Back at the hotel, there was a note slid under my door. Hotel stationery, 3 words written in block capitals. "Stay quiet, Helen." No signature. The pen had pressed hard enough to indent the paper. I ran my thumb over the groove. I called Aisha. "We have to end this before it ends me," I said. "Then we set the trap," she said. "You ready?" "I've been ready since I was born," I said, surprising myself. We designed it simply. Blue Halo was hosting its Spring of Mercy gala on the following Saturday at a hotel ballroom by the lake. They were honoring legacy donors and community angels. I had donated 1 check last year because my son asked me to. My name was in their brochure. I was invited to the gala. We would go. We would not scream. We would not accuse. We would document. We would let them show us what they wanted. And then, when everyone in a tuxedo was smiling into cameras, we would play a different kind of tape. 2 days before the gala, Tessa showed up with a dress bag. "For you," she said, unzipping it to show a navy sheath with a little sparkle at the collar. We want you to feel celebrated. We? The committee. You are what Blue Halo is all about. I thanked her and hung the dress in my closet. After she left, I checked the hemline for anything sewn into it that wasn't cloth. It is a terrible thing to feel suspicious of your own family. It is also the only thing that kept me alive that week. On the morning of the gala, I went to the cemetery. I sat by Michael's stone with a thermos of coffee and told him I was going to do something he would not have liked. Something public. You liked quiet solutions, I said. You believed we could fix things in kitchens. We can't fix this there. Forgive me. The wind picked up and the flags by the veterans section shook. I pressed my palm against his name until my breath calmed. The ballroom was a faux Tuscan room with chandeliers and too much beige. The kind of room where rich people feel good about being rich. Andrew wore a midnight suit. He looked tired. I had not seen him look rested in a year. Tessa looked like a magazine ad, hair loose around her shoulders, dressed the color of sangria. Harper wore a black dress and her combat boots. She hugged me hard, whispering, "Grandma, you smell like peppermint," like that was her way of saying she was afraid. "Welcome to the Spring of Mercy," the MC said into a microphone with the fake ease that comes from rehearsal. "Tonight we honor the hands and hearts that care for the people who built our city." Tessa went on stage to accept an award for visionary leadership. She spoke beautifully. She always does. She told a story about a woman who needed a ramp and got one in a week. She told another about a veteran who needed a breathing machine. No paperwork, no hassle, just love. She said community 6 times and mercy 8. She cried on the last line, just a little. People stood and clapped. At my table, a woman from the committee slid a folder toward me. "We thought we'd get some housekeeping done while we have everybody," she said brightly. "Just a couple standard forms. We can notarize right over by the step and repeat while you have your photo taken. Isn't that convenient?" I opened the folder. Durable financial power of attorney, medical release, a new version of the living will, tabs in yellow. "Sign here," a note in Tessa's hand. "So proud of you." I closed the folder. "I'm not comfortable signing tonight," I said, voice light. "Of course. No pressure," the woman said, already signaling a volunteer toward the notary table. I stood up. Maya, in a black dress and low heels, met me near the back doors, her press badge tucked into her clutch. Aisha was by the bar with a man I didn't know, his hair graying at the temples, his tie expensive and unmemorable. "Detective Karst," Aisha said quietly. "Financial crimes, Travis County. He's here to listen." I went back to my table. Dessert was a tiny cake that tasted like sugar and nothing else. Then the MC said, "We have a special testimonial," and invited me up. I didn't know that was coming. Or maybe I did and forgot. People turned their heads, faces tilted, hands ready to clap. Tessa put a hand on her chest, tears already pooling, like the kindness of the evening was overwhelming her. I stood at the clear podium. The room looked like a field of candles from there. I could see Maya by the wall, phone in her hand, filming. I could see Detective Karst talking to a man by the exit. I could see Andrew's hands clenched in his lap, his wedding ring shining. "Thank you," I said, "because manners do not leave you even when your life does. I'm grateful to anyone who cares for seniors. I was a principal for 30 years. I know what it means to fight for people who are too tired to fight for themselves." I paused. There is a kind of silence that is better than applause. I waited for it. "I received a letter 2 weeks ago," I said, "from a man who is in the hospital right now because someone wanted him quiet. He told me to look for the truth about Blue Halo. He told me to be careful with my family." A murmur rolled through the room like a draft under a door. Tessa shifted in her chair. Andrew looked at her, confused. I continued. "I am not here to accuse without evidence," I said, "so I will show you some." I nodded toward Maya. The screen behind the stage, until now filled with slides of ramps and walkers, changed. Photographs, invoices from Blue Halo to Careway for cognitive screenings, names of the patients. One was mine, on a day I was at a book club and could prove it. Another was a woman who had been dead for years. Then a list of items Blue Halo had paid for: portable oxygen machines, hospital beds, motorized scooters. Maya had put tiny green dots on the ones that had been delivered to real people and red dots on the ones that ended in storage units. The screen was almost all red. I heard someone gasp like a bird hitting glass. "Here are documents submitted to my bank with my signature," I said as scans came up, "granting financial authority to my daughter-in-law. Only this is not my signature." The room broke. Polite noise turned to talk, turned to voices raised. The MC hovered beside the stage with his fixed smile fraying. The notary at her table stood up and sat down again quickly, like she did not know which way was safest to look. Tessa stood, smoothing her dress, face composed, and walked toward the stage with her hands up. "Helen," she said into a microphone someone handed her, voice bright and brittle, like the top of spun sugar before the crack. "This is a misunderstanding. I wish you would come to me." "I did," I said quietly. "For 2 years." She laughed lightly, an actor's laugh. "You know, I would never—" The speakers played Michael's voice then, a recording we had pulled from the drive, and every person in that room listened. "I don't understand how my wife's screening happened," he said to the insurance adjuster. "She hasn't had one." And then his voice with Pastor Caleb. Tessa asked about power of attorney again. "This is not sitting right with me." Tessa's face changed. Not much, just 3 small things. Her eyes went flat. Her mouth dropped 2 millimeters. The tendons in her neck showed. "We're leaving," she said under her breath, the mic catching it. Andrew stood, his chair clattering back. He looked at me, then at his wife, then back at me. "Mom," he said, voice strangled, "what is this?" "It's the truth," I said. I wanted to touch his cheek like I did when he was 5 and thought a Band-Aid could fix anything. I did not. "Sit down." Detective Carr stepped forward with 2 uniformed officers. He wasn't here to arrest anyone, not yet, but he stood in the aisle like a man putting his foot through the door. "Nobody leave," he said, but he said it politely. A man at a Baptist dessert potluck. Tessa moved anyway. She lifted her chin, flipped her hair, and smiled at a donor she knew from church with all her teeth. She took Andrew's arm. "We're going now," she said through clenched teeth, lips not moving. Andrew let himself be led 2 steps and then stopped. "No," he said. She turned, blinked, like a camera trying to focus. "Excuse me?" "No," he said again. "Tell me what you did." If we are lucky, there is one moment in our lives when someone we love stops lying because they love us more than they love the lie. Andrew's shoulders were shaking. He was not brave as a boy. He was kind and gullible and stubborn. But he was brave now, in the one way bravery counts. He would not move. Tessa made the kind of sound a kettle makes right before it boils over. She tossed the folder with the forms onto the nearest table. It slid and papers fanned like playing cards. A donor bent to pick them up and stopped when he saw the tab that said, "Sign here." He looked at me, at the stage, at the notary table, at his wife. The room became the kind of quiet that follows a crash in the next room. "Enough," Tessa said, turning back to the stage. She was smiling again. "We have helped hundreds of families. We have cut through red tape to get them care they couldn't access. If a few forms were done fast, it was because the system is slow. You build for dead people," Maya said from the back, not loud but in the tone a person uses when the teachers have entered the room. A man I didn't know but had seen beside Tessa at meetings stepped forward. He wore the side part of a salesman and the watch of a man who likes people to see his watch. I would learn later he was a consultant for Caraway. He spread his arms. "Folks," he said, "this is a witch hunt." "Witches are women who refuse to drown," I said under my breath. The officers moved toward the aisle near the doors. The consultant took a step backward like the ground had tilted. The MC pretended to read from his note cards. Someone at the back of the room prayed out loud. You can always count on one person to pray out loud when rich people get scared. That night, the news broke before we left the parking lot. Maya had embargoed her story until we hit publish together in the car, my hand on the console, hers on the screen. "Blue Halo under investigation for fraud," the headline read under a photograph of Tessa with a golden halo fixture over her head, caught by a photographer who knew his symbols. By the time I hung up with the detective who promised to send a team to my house to secure the papers, the story had 3,000 shares and my phone was blowing up with numbers I didn't recognize. The next morning, a county investigator with kind eyes and a tired suit came to my hotel room to take my statement. He brought a woman from Adult Protective Services who sat quietly on the chair by the window and nodded when I said I was fine. She asked if I had someone who could stay with me. I said yes. It turned out the someone was Maya, who spread her files on my bed and fell asleep with her face on her forearm at 4 a.m, a pen still in her hand. Sunday afternoon, while I was at the hotel with my new, ridiculous pseudonym and a pot of coffee Maya had bullied the front desk into providing, my door rattled. "Please open up," a voice said. "Room service." I hadn't ordered room service. I walked quietly to the door, looked through the peephole and saw Tessa's face half turned away, hair tucked into a ball cap. I did not open the door. I moved to the desk and called the front desk. "There's someone pretending to be staff trying to get into my room," I said. The knock stopped. The footsteps went away. I sank into the chair and laughed once, a short sound, because the world had become a parody of itself, and sometimes laughter is the only way to keep breath moving. On Monday morning, 2 detectives visited Pastor Caleb. He wrote 2 names on a pad and slid them to Detective Karst. One was the consultant's. The other was a nurse practitioner affiliated with Careway. By Wednesday, there were warrants. By Friday, Blue Halo's accounts were frozen. By the following Tuesday, Tessa and the consultant were arrested at their office with the plaques still on the wall. The nurse practitioner turned herself in on Thursday morning and cried on the courthouse steps. Andrew called and called and called. I did not answer. On the 3rd day, he left a message I could not bear to hear twice. "Mom," he said, voice small. She said it was for the greater good. She said we were smoothing the way. I believed her. I knew about the forms. I didn't know about the other things. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I sat in the quiet hotel room and let the forgiveness I wanted so hard to give rise and fall like a tide I could not command. Then I called him back. "Andrew," I said, "I love you. I need to tell you some truths, and you need to listen without defending a single thing." He cried. I cried. We did not solve anything that day, but we began to. I testified before the grand jury in a windowless room with a fake plant in the corner and a pitcher of water on the table that made my hands sweat. I told them what Michael had found, what Caleb had written, what Blue Halo claimed, what Tessa had done. I spoke plainly. I did not dramatize because the facts dramatized themselves. An elderly man in the corner asked me to repeat the part about the cognitive screening. He shook his head when I did. "My wife got one of those calls," he said. I told her to hang up. The trial came quick because the evidence was not a thread to be pulled, but a net. The courtroom was not a grand one. It was a municipal room with stiff chairs and the smell of pine sol ground into the carpet. Tessa wore a cream suit the first day, hair pulled back, makeup softer than usual. She sat straight, hands together on the table, the picture of a woman being lied about by cruel people. The consultant looked bored. The nurse practitioner looked sick. The state called witnesses whose names I had seen on forms, people whose lives were made into numbers because it was easier to steal numbers than lives. A woman from my church with a thin face and thick address book cried when she said she had given $10,000 because she thought of her mother and her mother's walker. A man in a tool belt with splotches of paint on his forearm testified that he had built 6 ramps and billed for 20. A banker with a neat haircut explained how the Blue Halo account fed Careway every Thursday like clockwork. Maya sat in the first row of the gallery. Aisha sat behind me and tapped my shoulder when I gripped the arm of my chair too hard. Andrew sat on the other side of the aisle with Harper. He did not look at Tessa when she turned around. He looked down at his hands and then at me. It is possible to love your child and not like him. It is possible to love him and still testify to the truth that could put his wife in prison. Love is not a magic that clears a table. It is a broom and a dustpan, and the aching back you get when you clean until you see the real surface again. When I took the stand, the defense attorney tried to make me angry. He asked about my grief, about my blood pressure medication, about the time I left my debit card at the grocery store. He smiled when he said, "Miss Whitmore, isn't it true that memory becomes a bit unreliable at your age?" I smiled back and said, "I was a principal for 3 decades. I remember every student who ever came through my office crying. I know what pain looks like when it lies." The prosecutor asked me about the night of the gala. I told it simply. He asked me about Michael's fall. I looked at the jury and said, "My husband died because of a series of small and large betrayals. If we had known then what we know now, he would have been more suspicious, which is to say, more alive." We never learned which betrayal exactly pushed him down those back steps, whether the grip tape had been peeled or the light bulb had been unscrewed or his head had already been swimming from a pill that was not what it said on the bottle. The county declined to reopen the case, saying the evidence was insufficient. I learned something ugly and strong then. Sometimes justice is not a door that opens. Sometimes it is a window you wedge with your shoe and climb through anyway. The jury needed one long lunch and a short afternoon. Guilty on wire fraud, guilty on aggravated identity theft, guilty on conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. The consultant stared at the table. The nurse practitioner closed her eyes. Tessa did not cry. She sank into her chair like someone had punctured the air inside her. She looked smaller, and I had to fight a reflex to help her. It is possible to pity someone as you watch them drown and still know you must not extend your hand. She asked to speak at sentencing. The judge allowed it. She stood and delivered the speech of a woman who has practiced persuading rooms to see her as reluctant sinner and passionate helper. She spoke about navigating a broken system and cutting red tape. She said the words mercy and grandmother and God. When she was done, the judge, a man I had watched fall asleep during a property dispute once in a different courtroom, leaned forward and said softly, "Ma'am, you did not cut red tape. You set it on fire." She got 12 years. The consultant got 8. The nurse practitioner got 3 and a promise from the state that if she chose to testify in other proceedings, the rest might be probation. She nodded, eyes fixed on a scuff on the floor. Afterward, in the hallway, Andrew hugged me without words. He smelled like the aftershave Michael used to wear when we were young and poor, and he wanted to feel like a man who could bring me to fine dinners we could not afford. Harper tucked her hand into my elbow and walked me to the elevator. Maya stood with her notebook and did not take down a word. She held the elevator door with her foot and said, "Let's go get something with butter in it." I did not go back to my old house. A developer bought it 3 months later and knocked it down to build something with glass railings and a roof deck. I thought I would be devastated. I was not. It is possible to let a place go when you understand the place you loved is not the boards and bricks, but the years you survived inside it. I bought a small bungalow near the lake with a porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs and a lemon tree in the yard that will probably die in winter and try again in spring. I painted the kitchen the color of mourning. I am not the woman who sorted the forks to punish myself for asking the wrong questions anymore. I am the woman who keeps her passport in her purse because sometimes a letter arrives and you must leave to read it. Blue halo is gone. In its place is a sign on a locked door, but out of the wreckage came something I did not expect. Maya and I, with Aisha's cranky, patient legal brains guiding us, founded a small fund out of my living room called the Silver Line Defense Fund. We don't run casseroles. We don't run scams. We run a phone and a website and a calendar of workshops at churches where we stand in front of rooms and say, "Here's what a guardianship petition looks like. Here's what a durable power of attorney is, and here's what it is not. Here's how to freeze your credit. Here's how to name a champion who isn't your predator." People come. They bring their grown children. Some of those children sit in back with their arms crossed and leave early. Some stay and ask questions in voices that tremble. Harper moved in with me the spring after the trial. She finished high school from my kitchen table, eating cinnamon toast and writing essays about systems of care and the ethics of mercy. She got a job at the coffee shop 2 blocks away and learned how to look people in the eye when they say thank you. On her graduation day, she wore her boots. She squeezed my hand at the end of the ceremony and said, "I want to study social work or law or both. You made me mad and then you made me brave." I told her bravery is just a different word for loving the truth more than your own comfort. One night in July, she sat cross-legged on my living room rug with a stack of index cards and said, "Will you tell me all the stories you promised me when I was little? The ones about Dad before he was sad?" I told her about Andrew on the soccer field dragging his weightless legs behind a too big body. I told her about the afternoon he came home covered in paint because he had made a sign with the kids on the block protesting the tearing down of a tree. I told her about how he cried when the dog died, not because he loved the dog more than anything, but because he understood finally that things end. She asked if she could write to him in prison and if he would write back. I told her yes and yes, he did. He wrote ugly, honest letters about addiction to debt and to applause and to the siren of someone telling you that what you are doing isn't wrong if you're doing it for someone weaker. He wrote that he was learning how to sit with the hunger that used to send him to shortcuts. He wrote that he missed the smell of lemons. He asked if I would visit. I waited a long time because the sound of the gate in my memory was too loud. When I went, I brought him a lemon from the tree in my yard wrapped in a paper towel like a relic. The guard told me I couldn't bring it in. I smiled and said, "It's okay. He wouldn't know what to do with a whole one anyway." I told Andrew that joke later and he laughed for the first time in months. It sounded like a faucet turned back on after a freeze. Sometimes, late. I talk to Michael out loud even though I am not the kind of woman who used to talk to the dead. I tell him about the lemon tree and how, yes, I overwatered it and then forgot it for a week and we're figuring each other out. I tell him about Maya's new boyfriend who is too handsome for his own good and how Aisha's laugh can make a room feel like dessert. I tell him about Pastor Caleb leaving the hospital, thinner, paler, walking with a cane and a stubbornness that suits him. He came to my house for lunch in September. We ate chicken salad and sliced tomatoes. He put the envelope with his letter on the table between us and said, "I almost didn't send it." "I know," I said. We sat with that. Then he told me about resigning from the church. He said he needed a slower God for a while. He said he wanted to make a habit of telling truths the first time. I told him I would make a pot of soup for the second time. In late October, the wind came down the hill with the smell of cedar and school buses. I raked leaves and watched a neighbor boy ride his skateboard like gravity was a rumor. At dusk, I made tea and turned on a lamp by the window. I picked up a book I had been meaning to read for years and put it back down because the street looked interesting. There was a woman walking a dog that looked like a dust mop. A man in a cap jogged by with a face that said he would rather be anywhere else than inside his own body. A child carried a pumpkin bigger than her head. Every one of them was an entire life, full of grace and error and small mercy. I used to think the world was built on the right stories, told the right way to the right people. I think now the world is built on the moments we decide to pick up the letter or not, the moments we decide to read what it says and do the opposite of what would keep us comfortable. The moments we turn toward the person who is saying, "Something is wrong," and we do not look away, because looking away is easier. Sometimes a knock at the door is a casserole. Sometimes it is a beginning. When I hear a knock now, I stand in my kitchen with my hands braced on the counter, and I take one breath and then another before I open it, just to feel how strong air can be when it fills you. Just to remind myself that there is no age at which you are excused from being brave. On the first anniversary of the trial, we held a gathering in a church basement that smelled like coffee and old hymnals. We dragged folding chairs into a circle. Aisha opened with a story about a grandmother who brought her grandson to school every day for a year, and how when she died, the boy spoke at her funeral and said, "She taught me to carry keys." Maya told the room how to read an insurance letter without panicking. Detective Karst stood in the doorway and smiled like a man who had found something worth standing in a doorway for. When it was my turn, I didn't say much. I told them the thing I knew like I know my own name. I said, if a form appears in your life with your name on it and you do not remember asking for it, stop. If a medicine tastes different, stop. If someone who loves you insists you are confused when you know you are not, do not fight them. Do not argue in their kitchen. Walk to your own porch, sit down and make a list. Put your hand on the letter that came to you and trust the part of yourself that is suddenly, violently awake. After the meeting, a man in a ball cap waited until everyone had left and then took off his cap and held it in his hands. He was 50, maybe 60. He had the face of someone who has been forgiven before and cannot believe he has another ticket. My daughter-in-law is an angel, he said, and also maybe she is the devil. I don't know how to tell the difference. Angels cannot be in a room you are not allowed to leave, I said. Start there. He nodded and took a breath that sounded like the first one he had taken all week. That night, I came home and Harper had made a mess in my kitchen trying to bake bread. Flour dusted the counter like new snow. She had written on an index card in thick marker, "Leave this covered with a towel. Do not touch it. It has to rise." I put the towel over the bowl and turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway watching the shape of the bowl in the soft dark. You can do everything right with yeast and still have a loaf that doesn't rise. You can do everything wrong and wake up to a miracle. The trick is to put the towel over the bowl and go to sleep anyway. When I lay down, I felt for the edge of the bed like I did the week after Michael died, to make sure the bed was still there and not a raft floating in a room that had turned into an ocean. The bed was there. The ocean was somewhere else. In the morning, the bread had risen. We ate it with butter that tasted like the mouth of summer. Sometimes I drive past the old Hill Country storage and park under the sign that says, "No parking," because I am old enough to break small rules for good reasons. I turn down the radio and watch the doors of the units. Somewhere inside one of them is someone else's safe, someone else's notebook, someone else's letter waiting for the one person in the world who can read it. I say a prayer then, not the kind the pastor taught me, not the kind the judge hears in his head when he writes sentencing notes, but the kind a woman says when she has learned to live hand on the counter, breath deliberate. Let them find it. Let them have the good sense to be afraid. Let them love the truth more than they love their habit of sleeping through the knock at the door. One day, in late winter, we held a small ribbon cutting with a cheap blue ribbon and the dull scissors all office's own. The sign said, "Silver Line Defense Fund," in letters that looked like the inside of a spoon. We ate grocery store cake and laughed the way people do when they are tired to the bone and have decided to be happy anyway. A woman I didn't know set down a tin of cookies and said, "My mother always wanted to be the one to bring the cookies. She couldn't. I can." I hugged her and then went into the back room and cried, because you cannot always tell the difference between mercy and grief, and sometimes you don't have to. At night now, I lock my door. I turn on the porch light. I pour a glass of water and set it by the bed. I touch the corner of the letter Pastor Caleb sent, even though the edges are soft now. I kiss my fingers and press them to Michael's name in the photograph by the lamp. I check my phone for a text from Harper that says, "Be home by 10. Love you." I am not fearless. I am, however, impossible to persuade against my own eyes. The letter was right and wrong at the same time. "Do not trust Tessa mess," it said. I did not. It saved my life. "Ask no one for help," it said. I asked everyone, and that saved my life too. If there is wisdom at my age, it is this. Sometimes the instructions you receive were written by a man who wanted to protect you from something he could not face himself. Read them. Obey what you must. Break what you must. Put the key in the lock. Open the door. Step inside, and when the room is empty except for the safe and the little phone and the letters that will upend your world, pick them up with both hands and say your husband's name out loud so you remember who taught you to read the truth when the truth was too heavy for one person to carry. My name is Helen Whitmore. I am 69 years old now. I am not in a nursing home. I am not confused. I am rebuilding a life I did not know I would be allowed to have. In a drawer by the sink, next to the rubber bands and twist ties, there is a small envelope with a copy of the letter that started all this. Sometimes I take it out and hold it for a minute, not because I need to be reminded of the danger, but because I like to feel the weight of the key still taped at the bottom of the page. It is heavier than you would think. It reminds me the doors we fear the most are sometimes the ones that lead, finally, to the rooms where we belong.